All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this conversation, I'm joined by someone I've been listening to since I was in elementary school. Huge influence on me at that time and certainly to this day. So it's a real honor to welcome Mr. Karl Agell. Karl, how are you, man?
Hey, I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. We've got quite a bit to get into. Uh,
Yeah,
you have a great history in music, and it turns out as we've gotten to know each other a bit, our list of mutual friends is kind of staggering. So, we'll be diving
yeah,
into quite a bit, of various things throughout this conversation.
I know.
But for the viewer who is new to Carl, he's I would
What?
say perhaps I know.
That's impossible.
By the rare chance someone doesn't know Karl Agell. Carl has been a singer for a variety of bands. He's doing some great stuff currently that we'll get into. But for a lot of people who came up in the late 80s, early 90s, particularly in hardcore and metal and crossover, they would know Carl as the former singer for Corrosion of Conformity during the Blind era. And
Yeah.
we'll definitely get into all of that. But to kind of rewind things at the very beginning for you, um, when and how did music take hold of you to where you realized that this would ultimately end up being your life's work?
It was always there. It was always there in the background. And kind of have, I had the good fortune of being the youngest, having two older sisters, and also parents that embraced music um, through all different phases. It was just a rock solid thing. I'm born in the 60s. Full disclosure, and coming up, that was something that was hugely a part of our lives. Love them or hate them, the Beatles, I love them. Sorry if you hate them. That was always in the background, and lots and lots of other great bands. Like and this all kinds of genres. So I'm from Sweden originally, and still a Swedish citizen, born in Canada, also a Canadian citizen, and grew up all over the place. But the one thing that followed us, no matter where we went, was the vinyl, which I actually still have all of it. I'm the guy that clung to all the records, and there was always that thing going through the house. When we first moved to Hong Kong, my dad bought this insanely huge stereo. This is 1971, okay? And as a wee lad, and I still have that equipment. And it was these massive speakers, a Kai reel-to-reel, Thorns turntable, Sansui, rectilinear, all this crazy shit that was super cheap when you got, in Asia, Hong Kong, 1971. So we had this incredible system with all this amazing vinyl, and the momentum, a cultural momentum globally of all this great music coming out, and I was saturated in it, and just it woke something in me, and I just remember um, listening to like Jesus Christ Superstar with Ian Gillan singing the part of Jesus, and Murray Head singing the part of Judas, and just being blown away, not because I was in some kind of religious fervor necessarily, but just because I heard things in there, this delivery, and then that led me to other things like Deep Purple and blah blah blah, and all that. So I was really lucky. My oldest sister, she turned me on to Zeppelin and that kind of thing, and my middle sister who turned me on to Blondie and the Clash. So I was very fortunate to have that going growing up through the 70s, and then um, when I played sax and played harmonica. There was no scene in Hong Kong in the 70s. It was a British colony in China, a very weird kind of situation that it's hard to explain if you weren't there. My mother remarried, ended up in Connecticut,
Hmm.
and what ultimately became the Connecticut hardcore scene. And that's when I first realized that I could go to shows and be a part of something. And I probably just rambled your ear off, but that's
No, no, and it's great. I was wondering how Connecticut would finally fit into the puzzle here. Um, and as you know, I've interviewed a few people from that era recently, most recently being Lindsay Anderson from Vatican Commandos,
Oh, right on. Yeah. Awesome.
and Sex Bomb, Mr. John Bomber has been on twice.
Yes.
So I realized,
Respect.
um, yeah, I've realized it's such a rich scene out there back then. I wasn't a participant in it, obviously. I grew up in New Jersey, and I was definitely way too young to go to Connecticut to a hardcore show. Um, but especially with John's help, I've learned quite a bit about that time period I wasn't aware of previously. And there's such a rich history in Connecticut, particularly surrounding the anthrax and that whole
Oh,
scene.
yeah.
Um, and I know some of your experiences during that time revolve around your participation in the band Seizure with John Bomber and Jeff Coleman. Uh,
Yep.
two guys who are still around in the scene, and still act.
Awesome. Awesome guys, man.
So how did Seizure come about? Because you were the original singer for Seizure, correct?
Yep. I was just like it happened back in those days. We were hanging out at the Anthrax Gallery, the original one in Stamford, and which was a super badass concept, true punk rock, do it yourself, create your own scene thing with an art gallery upstairs, the Sheridan brothers, Brian and Sean, and a bunch of a supporting cast. We were all the supporting cast, and really cool stuff going on upstairs. And then two shows solid every week. Friday and Saturday would be 4 to 5 bands. Friday and Saturday for like $5, nothing.
Hmm.
It wasn't a bar; it was just a basically a legal basement club, not in a kind of a crappy part of Stamford, Connecticut, which made it work. Nobody was checking on it or hassling generally, and just every band you can think of that was relevant or whatever or smaller in the scene came through. Some of the giants, like Black Flag and MDC and Government Issue and I don't know, on and on. I could just sit here and read the list, but so many of those kind of like huge bands from all over the country came through. And the Anthrax is just part of a broader thing that was going on across the country. But I happened to be there
Hmm.
and hanging out, and I just had Jeff Coleman come up to me and say, "Hey, man, we got a band going. Do you think you want to sing?" I was 16 years old, and I was like, "Uh, okay, sure." And then I remember going to his place, his dad's house, this kind of like like really tall, narrow house in the middle of nowhere in Bridgeport, or in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and in that tiny little basement. And I think it was like a Fender Vibro Champ, a little combo. And the way I sang was by plugging in some headphones, the quarter-inch jack, and headphones work in reverse. If you yell into them and they're plugged into a mic jack, you can actually use them as a microphone. So that was the mic initially, and us going for it, and recording some stuff like the Mystic sampler. I think it was like 1983. Doug from Mystic out in California, and the song Jackie on the Corner, which were lyrics that John Bomber uh, found on a bathroom wall. It was me just screaming at the top of my lungs like 9 times in a row. So these little stanzas, that was our glorious start, and it was awesome. And it didn't matter if you sucked. It didn't matter if you were confused. It was just a great outlet for a bunch of uh, rejected, pissed off kids or whatever, or happy kids too. We found each other, and that became our family. And they brought me in, and it was fucking awesome. And we ended up doing a couple samplers, which I could rattle off, I guess, and an EP that I think came out in what 85, 86. All hail the fucking system. Uh, and all those lyrics still apply, by the way, and the album cover still or the EP cover still applies. We predicted everything. It was going to turn out this way. And then you know, the Connecticut Fun compilation, which is rad. And just lots of other little things. So I'm just rambling, but it was great. It was awesome. We got to
Well,
play. Yeah, good.
I was just thinking, what amazes me about that era, and when I had Sex Bomb on, we talked a little bit about it, is the fact that, for example, you mentioned Seizure was on that Mystic compilation, and that was a label in California. You're in Connecticut, 3,000 miles away. In 2024, it's easy to do something like this, right? We can have a
Yeah.
Zoom call and do whatever. I can talk to John later tonight on Facebook, no problem. But this is 83, 84. And the fact that there was no internet, it was just word of mouth. The fact that you guys would end up working with somebody in California is kind of mind-blowing when you consider how primitive a lot of this stuff was, and the
Ye-
fact that bands like AOD went out on tours back then,
Oh yeah.
it's just mind.
It was sheer will, you know what I mean? It was just the drive and people wanting to do their art, you know what I mean? Like to create and get it out there. And what was so great about the punk scene, the hardcore scene, however you people want to define it, whatever it was, there was just so much support and um, so many places that we could call home across the country. Seizure, with me at least, never went much further than the Northeast. I think we made it down to Delaware and yeah, and the furthest point definitely Jersey, definitely like New York City and Connecticut and New York States, but wherever it, the bands that went further and wider, there was always somebody who was willing to support and listen and was in the same boat. So it was a shared experience, and it was pretty amazing. So that enabled people to expand upon the kind of pen pal thing, right? Where you would write to people, friends across the world or wherever, the far and wide, and reach out and people would actually you'd go and get open a letter and read it and mail your cassette or your 7-inch or whatever the hell it was, and people would share stuff, and it was just a cool network. It was legit. So it was pre this glorious age, but it was real. It actually happened. It was doable.
That's so cool. And it's just, having not been part of that era. I mean, in the 90s when I was active in bands, it was a bit like that still,
Yeah,
but it was a little easier.
you got
Uh,
your street. Did you get your street team? Yeah.
we never got that. Well, actually, I did work with a band that had a street team, but they had a label and stuff.
No, I'm
But
just
that whole thing too was vastly different than the way things are now. A street
oh
team
yeah.
is a Facebook post and a event page. And I think we've lost some of that feet on the ground sort of activity, that more organic, like you got to go to a show and actually meet somebody and shake their
Right.
hand, become friends, and then you book shows together.
Well,
It's a little bit too easy these days sometimes, I think.
I think not sound like some old man yelling to tell people to get off my lawn, but sometimes I feel that way. But it's kind of like, and I don't fault anybody who has done internet dating or whatever. But for me, it was like I was always like, you can't smell them. You're not in the same room. You can't read the room. You can't get a vibe of like who. It removes a lot of the immediate sensory kind of perception, and it does that. I'm not delegitimizing anything or anybody, but I'm just saying at that time it was very there was a you could touch it, you could taste it, you could feel it kind of thing, you
Right.
know. And there's still that too, and there's always a blowback, and I know there's plenty of kick-ass garage and house shows and small club shows still going with vibrant, cool scenes, and I see it here in Durham, North Carolina. And I go to some shows here, and I was blown away that there's that, and people communicating and literally making tapes, that kind of. So not that that's the only way forward, not at all, but
Mm.
it's there. That vibe is still there. It's just a different time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And your time with Seizure lasted about 4 years.
yeah, 4 years. I was in high school and then went to college to Yukon, stores, near Hartford, Wilmanic. and was not super excited about being there after one semester, and then transferred to State University of New York at Purchase, kind of SUNY Purchase, which is right across the street, like right there next to Connecticut, Westchester County, just north of New York City. And I was still able to get back to that scene, and also, which I love so much, and the Anthrax and all the New York City scene and Jersey, and going to shows. And I I wasn't ready to leave that. So I was lucky to do that. And I was going to pretty kick-ass art school, that was supportive, with lots of cool people there into art. And there was no frats, no jocks, it was pretty cool. So I like that, man. So, whatever. But it was still a vibrant place to be. So I was fortunate. And again, I'm rambling, so I'm losing track. So where are we with
So
things?
you're up at SUNY Purchase. Uh,
Yeah,
that did that kind of coincide with you and
it
Seizure?
did. Yes, sorry. And so Seizure was, yeah. And then I decided that it was time to move on. Um, and I feel like I parted. It was a good parting. I don't think, maybe they have a different memory of it, but I was just kind of doing my own thing and ready to try something else. And that's when uh, I saw that School of Violence was looking for somebody, and joined with them for just exactly 1 year, but did a fair amount of playing that year. And with Steg and Rick Stone and Mark Evans, rest in peace. Ended up being the drummer for Warrior Soul later.
Right.
Um, and obviously he's not with us. He's not with us anymore. It had a sad ending. But no, that was, we had a good thing going. We're signed to Death Metal Blade, um, which was the up and coming crossover label. And I was still finding my voice. That was the thing with Seizure. I kind of, through that whole period, all the different recordings, I sound a little bit different. Like I was trying to figure out how to paint with a brush and what was going to work. And, ran the gamut from thinking I wanted to be Darby Crash, thinking I wanted to be Cal from Discharge, thinking I wanted to be with um, Lemmy, or Kronos from Venom, whatever, or like Tom from Celtic, or Celtic Warrior, however you want to say it. Like I was like, oh, this stuff is so cool, and I was like kind of all over the place. And then leaving School of Violence and joining C.O.C. That's where I kind of like realized, hey, maybe I could just sing, and there was hints of that earlier, like on it was a compilation Seizure did called Connecticut Fun, and there's some polar opposite things going on. Like there's a song called Guns for Everyone, which is a great song, where I'm just literally doing my best Brandon negative approach, kind of belting it out, trying to do that. And then on Connecticut Fun, and I'm just kind of singing, you know, like it's a Christmas carol or something, And that was just me working things out on other people's dime, I guess, but people put up with it. And then with C.O.C, I think I've kind of found my voice, when I ended up doing that jump to North Carolina.
Yeah. Before we dive into COC, I wanted to kind of preface
Yeah,
it,
yeah, please. I,
kind of a, well, it's
I
sort of,
will ramble, man. So you just stop me. You just stop
I
me anytime.
I love when guests talk. It makes my job so much easier. So please. Um, but I wanted to, for example, I had Scott from Verbal Abuse on a couple months ago, and we were talking about
Awesome.
the crossover era. And number one, this is when I discovered hardcore was really through crossover, like the Agnostic Front Cause for Alarm record, the Crumb Suckers, what COC was doing, like
Yeah.
Technocracy Forward,
Yeah.
and I love that era. I think I listened to more crossover than what some people would call like traditional hardcore. So, and I know people have different opinions on crossover's impact on what was hardcore at that point. And obviously you joined COC when it really changed more crossover. They were kind of hinting at it along the way, and then when the Blind album comes out, you're all in. What kind of reaction did you get from, seeing people, fans that were watching some bands like yourselves, like Verbal Abuse, and AF, kind of going in that more sort of rock metal direction. Was there blowback to that, or was it generally accepted?
There was definitely some blowback, but at the time we kind of knew we were onto something. I was one of those people that, um, like I said, I was trying to find my identity vocally and just also who I was and what I was into. And, you know, I, I grew up, I always loved Motorhead and Thin Lizzy, you know what I mean? But I also loved Black Flag and the Bad Brains and Discharge and Circle Jerks, or, I can name much more obscure bands, but, I mean, it was just always, it wasn't a contest for me. It was just like finding the best impulses, and it just something woke up inside of me, and I was like, how about, I like the power of this. I remember going to see Prong, and when they were just destroying and bringing it, and going like, holy fucking shit, this is awesome, and many other bands too. But there was a great example, and just being blown away that you could kind of be this, punk rock art weirdo, you know, and then also embrace these weird metal impulses, hard rock impulses, and blues based stuff. And a lot of it too, honestly, is some of us, we jumped in, like I said, we're just trying to figure it out. And then we're like, wow, okay, we're learning how to play our guitar, our drums, our vocals. And, some of this structure and some of this stuff's pretty cool. And some of these, some of this riffing's okay. And for me, I was like, it feels good, and I didn't want to have to apologize for that. But I came at it with like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was like heavy music that wasn't just about, um, chicks and dragons and stuff? Though, who doesn't love that? But I'm just saying, I'm being silly, or, but also just come and bring the rage, bring the punk rock rage, bring a crass assault over a heavy, guitar assault, bring that kind of mindset of just, so that's for me. I always dug that about COC. That's what drew me to them. And I actually answered the way I discovered them. I mean, Seizure had opened up for them in, I think it was 1985 in Enfield, Connecticut, and cross paths. And I went and saw them many, many times. And then I saw an ad in the Village Voice in the classified section. That's a newspaper, people, in case people don't know what that is, right? It's a newspaper that was important at the time if you lived in that area. And the classified section was kind of cool to check out. Somebody's like, hey, look, Corrosion of Conformity says singer wanted. And I was like, what? Looking at it, and it said a cross between HR, Alice Cooper, and James Hetfield was, and then they did another one that came out later, said a cross between Ian Gillan, shit, I can't remember. But it was like, I like all that shit. Why not? So that made me, I was like, okay, why the fuck not? And joined COC, and that was, I think, the vibe is like, it's okay, we're allowed to embrace Metallica, but we can also embrace Black Flag, and you know what I mean. And it didn't matter. And you can hear Blind. It's a little bit all over the place. You hear all kinds of shit
Hmm.
floating through that thing, and we're just working it out. But it was just some cool moments. It's a lot of winging it, a lot of experimentation, a lot of just drive. Um, and that just, it seemed to work for those songs.
Now, who was in COC when you joined? Was Mike already gone at that
Mike
point?
was gone. So Mike was not ejected by me. So a lot of people in North Carolina, people have this concept that don't know, like, that, especially the people that are like, oh, anything after Animosity and Technocracy sucks and all that. I'm like, I was like the Yankee heavy metal carpetbagger that came down and, ran them off and made Corrosion of Conformity be a heavy metal band, and like nothing could be further from the truth. I was just a guy who had short hair, then got tired of the tribal violence of the uniform and said, fuck this, I'm growing my hair out after almost being murdered for having a shaved head when I went back to Sweden. I was like, I'm not a Nazi skinhead. Please don't kill me, So was like, fuck a haircut, grew my hair out. That's a whole nother story right there. I grew my hair out. I was like, fuck this. I was like one of the punk rock guys with hair down to my ass, like this, fuck all this shit. And so COC was on the same wavelength. They just were just kind of done with a lot of the hardcore punk scenes marching in lockstep. And like any other moment slash movement, it can evolve or devolve or whatever, it becomes something where all of a sudden there are rules that weren't there before. And I felt that that was part
Yeah.
of it, of having to look the same, and like anything else. So it was cool. I found kindred spirits with them, and we just were able to experiment. So to answer your question, Mike had already left. Phil Swisher, who was good friends with the band, and it was a local down there, uh, originally a guitar player, really gifted guitar player, joined, taking up the playing bass, and he joined actually on the Technocracy tour, and they did dates with Phil playing bass and Simon still singing.
Mm.
And then at a certain point that stopped, and Simon, I believe at that time he moved to California. Mike had moved to Philly, and the band was basically quiet for over about a year and a half. And that's when I heard they were looking for someone and saw the ads. And so there was this, hey, are we going to do this? And I came down and worked it out. So Pepper Keenan had actually auditioned 8 months prior to me, didn't get the job as vocalist. He was in a band called Graveyard Rodeo in New Orleans, came up, but he kind of hung out and lived in Reed's basement and ended up playing second guitar, you know. And that was not the plan originally, but it was just a amorphous thing trying to sustain itself. And he became the second guitar player, and I showed up, and we moved on from there.
Mm.
You know,
And how much of what became Blind was written or being worked on when you joined the band? Was that already kind of moving forward, or did it?
just a couple songs are floating around. So Buried, the song, for those, it's a song on Blind, was written in advance, and it was actually part of my audition. So it was sent to me along with two more Technocracy era songs that were definitely more of that ilk. And that one, Buried, the music stuck in my head. They demoed it, and I was going through some kind of shitty stuff personally. Um, don't want to bore you with all that, but Buried, I kept listening to it, and that cut through, and I woke up with the words and the vocal melodies in my head, like, and it was all about kind of what I was going through. And you know, not saying it came to me, I'm a genius, no, but it just kind of, that's the way it came into my trance, like, into my brain. And then so that was sent to me, and I showed up ready to go with that song with lyrics and ideas. And that's kind of where it sealed the deal, when I had that to bring. And I took that demo version and tracked on. So that and some other songs were early on, like Dance of the Dead was early on. Um, there was things floating around, and then it just kind of kicked into gear. So when when I first joined the band, we were still doing the Animosity, Eye for an Eye, Technocracy stuff.
Mm.
Like the summer of 89, my second, third, fourth, and fifth shows were opening up for the Bad Brains, the original lineup, and doing that stuff and bringing it. And later on, we scored Danzig Soundgarden, Danzig Lucifuge, summer of 90, and with Soundgarden doing Louder Than Love and us doing
Yeah.
early Blind stuff, but mostly old stuff, and which was pretty incredible. We went out and for 6 weeks with them, and the band became rock solid through that. We also went on that same year, we went out, actually before that we went out with DRI, and it was DRI and COC's first European tour, and together on one tour bus. And I could write a chapter on each day of that tour of like wacky hijinks. But anyways, So we fleshed out a lot of that stuff early on, and then it evolved, and then we finally got put in the studio. But we were young, man. We were in our 20s, and we were committed, and this is what we're doing. I've lived from couch to couch or hammock in the practice space kind of thing, and we poured everything we could into it. It wasn't we put it, so we made it happen, and we laid siege to it, and ended up first talking to Caroline and then signing with Relativity. And spent 10 weeks in New York City recording that album, actually. And that's also a book could probably be written on that, on some of those 10 weeks. It was insane. So
Well, it's from a fan's perspective, it was such an interesting time for COC. I mean, not only did the lineup change considerably from Technocracy, but musically things had changed. And you mentioned you're on tour with Danzig and Soundgarden. Soundgarden was one of the bands sort of reshaping rock and metal at that point. I
yeah,
was the same for you. You mentioned Prong, that was another one. There were also bands like Mordred kicking around. It was
oh
like this
yeah,
very cool, like next level thing. Living Color, was doing stuff.
yeah.
So it was like this whole new era of metal. And in some cases, these bands were eventually getting picked up by majors, which I know happened to COC eventually. Um, and it was very exciting to see where the evolution went, because there are some people I know who fell in love with COC beginning with your era, and they listen to Animosity, I don't think it's the same band. And there are people who, swear by the early years, and there are people like myself who I listen to all the records, I go, it makes sense. They would go from Eye for an Eye to Deliverance. Like I can see that happening as I
I
look at
was
records.
technically singer number 6. I mean, you know. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so it was an exciting time to be a COC fan, and I love that Blind album. I am curious though, because that lineup with yourself and Phil and Pepper and Woody and Reed lasted just that one album. Why didn't that carry on forward?
You know, it, there was forces at work, and I don't want to sit here and talk about negative things, but there were some bad things that were going on. At least for me, they were bad. So, I've worked through that in my head, and I'm bummed things went wrong, and nobody's perfect. But Pepper wanted to be the singer, you know, and he auditioned to be the singer, and he ended up being the singer. And um, you got to, we co-wrote a ton of the lyrics on that album. He was essential, you know what I mean? Originally, Vote with a Bullet was my title. Um, but then I did a 13-hour vocal session for Damn for All Time. And then they said, hey, why don't you do Vote? Oh, you're tired. Why not? You should have Pepper sing it. And Pepper sang it, his version of it, which is great. It's great. But there was just a lot of stuff going on that wasn't discussed or planned necessarily,
Hmm.
and forces at work, so by the time we got to making of Deliverance, there's a version of me. I was in the studio for 5 weeks. I recorded a version of Deliverance. I got fired in the studio. I don't know if people know that during the making of Deliverance.
Hmm.
And I was fired by the producer, and it was not a good experience. And that was when Columbia was picking us up. And there was just a lot of internal band politics, and for me, heartbreak and misunderstanding. And the forces of work that were manipulating the Reed's opinion and all that. That's how I see it. And but it is what it is. And he's gone. But he apologized to me 8 years later after I, you know, it could have been it's something different. It isn't. It didn't happen. That's the story of so many rock and roll bands. Whatever, Cry Me a River.
Hmm.
I wish it had worked out, but I guess it wasn't meant to be. Um, so, I got fired and, was told I couldn't sing. I was dangerous and unapproachable, blah, 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 and, blah, 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 and got shit canned. And, remember, and then, Phil Swisher said, fuck this. I'd rather be in a band with you. He walked away from a really good thing that was going on, an easy thing, and sacrificed to do that with me. Woody played in an early version of Leadfoot that was called Loose Cannon uh, for 9 months actually. So because he was unsure of where things were going, he was friends with both camps. So he played with us. We were going to sign with Mike Gitter was at Atlantic. Mike Gitter probably,
Sure.
and he was going to sign us to Atlantic, and then um, the pressure remained, like but the Columbia thing was happening for C.O.C. and Woody made the decision to go with that. And I understood that because was a founding member of the band and, he wanted it to carry on. And I bear no ill will to anybody, but it was what it was. We were young, lots of forces at work. I wish it had worked out. It didn't.
Mm.
Um, Glad I had my moment. And then Loose Cannon became Leadfoot and we signed with Roadrunner and then suffered through various, band tragedies and lineup changes and just heartache with that too. We couldn't seem to catch a break, but I'm proud of those records. But you know,
Well, Leadfoot was around for a bit. You guys had a pretty decent.
yeah, and we're technically not broken up. You know what I mean? Like we reserve the right to do a show. Um, uh, so not to jump way ahead, but Graham Fry, who is was in Leadfoot and is in Leadfoot, is also my bandmate in Lie Heavy.
Mhm.
So and the main songwriter for that. And so we've always had a relationship. We've been playing together for 30 years, so on and off doing our thing. So it's kind of insane to think of that 30 years, but yeah, he's a badass. So yeah, it became that, you know, and Leadfoot got lumped in kind of with the whole stoner rock uh, thing, post stoner rock thing, and we were just kind of we were just doing the full blown rock and roll thing to say, fuck it, we'll embrace any and all things serious and silly and not take this, not, we want it to be fun. It's
Mm.
a really, really good band though. And played a bunch of dates across Europe and mostly and did our best. But we had a couple tough times. Monty Connor signed us to Roadrunner. Um, and we Bring It On was we did that in Hollywood at the same studio that Tool and like No Doubt went to, like Undertow was, like a great studio called Grandmaster in Hollywood. And we're out there for 6 weeks tracking this thing. Back in the day when you get big budgets and things were looking good. And then we hooked up with the Singerman guys, which was Motorhead's management
Right,
and
right.
Fair Warning, with massive booking agency lined up, and those guys, the Motorhead guys, merged with Frank Sinatra's management, and uh, favors were owed. It was looking like was released in Europe, got like just kick-ass reviews in Kerrang and all these rags back then, and we were looking like we were going to be on Ozfest and was it '98 or something? Like things were looking great, and all of a sudden, Roadrunner pulled the plug, and it all kind of fell apart. The drummer, the guitar player quit. We had to reform, and just the usual shit bands go through.
Why did
And
they pull the plug? Any particular reason?
we were so my understanding of it, and I'm sure there's the inside track that somebody could, like you could probably ask Monty and be like, get the real reason, but you know, money and all that stuff. But at that time, we were too rock and roll, and they were really banking on Cold Chamber and that kind of newer metal kind of thing going on. And I think Roadrunner just was a very top down experience for a lot of those people working there. And there were some higher ups that probably said, nope, nope, this doesn't fit the bill. You know, these guys are like a bar band. They're not a metal band or something, like, nope, so, who knows? Fucking labels, man. They fucking suck.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And they're great and they suck and fuck
Right.
them, and all that. But I was grateful for the opportunity. But so just we kept trying, and great players that people I still talk to and reserve the right to play with, and but there was some like bad luck, like every time we do something like the shipment would catch on fire, like of the albums, I'm serious, shit like that, like Black Cloud stuff. The third album, We Drink for Free, which nobody really knows about, but is almost my favorite Leadfoot album. And you can actually go to YouTube and type in Leadfoot We Drink for Free. It's a great record, and it's like um, crazy rock and roll. It's like, there's a sweet cover on there. There's also a secret hidden Dead Boys cover, and it's just all over the place in a cool way. Like we're paying homage to a lot of things, but all the originals are killer. I really feel that. But that album was released on Abstract, and when I went to mastering, Digital Ironworks, that's who they were, I think in Long Island, mastered the album and released it with approved and released it with like 16 errors, like skips and pops. And I remember getting the CD, super excited, putting it in and go, oh man, I must have a defective CD. And then everybody else having the same experience. And it was recalled. They pulled it off the shelves and then said, we have no budget to put this out again.
Huh.
So we had to bootleg our own album, like, and keep trying. It was just like, God damn it, can't catch a break. So there were some tough years, man. But it, stuff I still love to this day, like some of my babies, sitting out there, So for you out there that are really interested, get on the old YouTubes and type in like Leadfoot We Drink for Free was the name of the album.
Yeah.
So
I'll link it in the video description too.
yeah, please. Anyways, yeah,
Yeah, totally.
We Drink for Free. Yeah, we were probably a little fucked up too. That was the early 2000s.
Now,
I remember some of it.
I remember it was a few years after that. I was really excited to see you were doing a project called King Hitter.
Yeah, yeah. I
And I
love King
really
Hitter
dug
too.
that stuff, man.
Yeah, we with Paula, we signed with God damn it. She's gonna kill me, but Paula Hogan. Awesome. We signed the small deal and put it out. It was a 5-song EP, self-titled King Hitter, whatever. And some kick-ass songs. It was Scott, the guitar player from the the Leadfoot guitarist, and myself, hooking up some other guys to do this. And yeah, it was cool. We really wanted to make that happen, but then again, we ran into some lineup issues and changes, and um, people making bad decisions within the band, and
mm,
being difficult to be in the band with so and so and so and so, and you know, problems.
yeah, it's called being in a band,
Being a
unfortunately.
fucking band, right? So yeah, right. I'm the only one who's ever suffered that. So no, being in a fucking band, and just personalities, and I got to the point where I just was like, you know what? I'm too fucking old to deal with somebody's fucking goddamn crisis
Mm,
that is manufactured by them. It wasn't like, you know, I cannot, I can't carry this. I can't pull this card anymore. I was like, I'm just saying it's not fucking working.
mm.
Um, we wrote more stuff. That's really cool. Scott, and the other guys too, John Chambliss, and people wrote great things like and Mike, and Chuck, and it was just, but it just wasn't gonna work. So yeah, being in a fucking band. So
Well, it's cool that the EP's out there, and I'd recommend anyone who hasn't heard that stuff to track that
it's
down.
actually really, for some reason, it got yanked. It was on YouTube. It got yanked. I need to just upload it somehow.
Mm,
It used to be on Spotify and all these streaming services. It disappeared for whatever reason. So I just need to actually sit down and take make an effort to get it out there, and it's just, you know, how it goes.
Yeah.
I'll get around to it someday. You know?
Now, around that time, or maybe shortly thereafter, COC kind of comes around to you in a strange way because you start performing shows as COC Blind with Reed Mullen.
Well, he reached out to me and quietly said, we fucked up, or but he had a love-hate thing going on with his own band that he was a founding member of, and there was some other personal, he had obviously some serious things going on with him, but I was we had buried the hatchet a while back, and did some quick little reunion shows. And when I was in Leadfoot, we did one when our good friend Ivan died in Confessor, another great band from North Carolina, amazing band. And in fact, the bassist from Confessor is in Lie Heavy now. And Graham Fry, who was in Leadfoot, is in Leadfoot and is Lie Heavy, was also the original guy from Confessor. So, anyways, our good friend Ivan died suddenly in Confessor, and then we did this tribute memorial show to help out his wife, and it was Confessor and then Leadfoot, members of Leadfoot getting together with Reed Mullen saying, hey, let's do a couple COC songs. And then we realized later on, like, okay, people are really into this still. And Reed was doing his thing. I decided to do a thing where I did Karl Agell's Blind, like I named it that. It's like Karl Agell's Blind, or Karl Agell's Blind, whatever. So just as a joke, a little bit, tongue in cheek, and did this show, and people, I had members of good friends from other bands jump in, and Scott Little from Leadfoot, and we jumped in and did this. And after we did this, it wasn't Reed playing drums. A good friend of mine, Bill, on drums, and Bill Egan, amazing drummer. And shortly thereafter, Reed Mullen reached out. He was like, "Oh shit, you know, some people are into this. Like it's viable." And then over the course of over a couple of years, we came together and did some dates here and there, and realized it was a cool thing to do. The best kind of period was 2015 was when we did the most and went out there the most. We had tried in 2005, 2009, dates, and it was with our buddy, first originally Jason Browning, great guitar player, and then the bassist Jerry Barrett used to play with HR solo stuff, Bad Brains HR, a good friend of mine still. They're all good friends of mine, but they we figured out this was a viable thing to do, and there was a couple of lineup changes with the guitarists and stuff, but Reed Mullen and myself and Scott, through and through, and Jerry Barrett, and then we scored 70,000 tons of metal and played the boat. It was January of 2015, and that was kick ass. Out on this crazy, you know cruise metal experience, and seeing all these incredible bands like Napalm Death, and you know some Anvil, and some version of Venom, and you know you know uh God, there's so many other bands. Anyways, we played that. It was kick ass, and then later on we went out and did was it 4 or 5 weeks with Death Angel and Cavalier Conspiracy
Hmm.
across the United States, and people were losing their shit. And a bunch of younger people came up and said, "Hey, I never got to see you guys during the original, when you were in the band back in between 1989 and 93, that short window." And they were super excited and super grateful that we could bring it. And, we were really careful to make sure it was true to the record and done well. And Reed was kicking fucking ass. Like he was nailing that insane shit he did on Blind, like, you listen to that album, it was just mind blowing what he was bringing, rhythmically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as a drummer, I think that is his finest hour as a player, is just
Right.
blind, you know. I mean, he was always a great drummer. He was kind of like a Bonham type in a way, you know.
Oh
He had
yeah.
that feel. And even when he was doing the hardcore stuff, he had a lot happening behind the kit. But
Yeah.
his work on Blind, I think that's like a great um introduction to Reed as a drummer. Like if you want to show somebody what the guy was capable of, you hand him that record, you know.
Yeah, he was just a natural talent, and he was a uh, just an incredible person that was able to realize a lot of things for a lot of people. He was uh, such an important person beyond that, going back in the hardcore punk scene and then on through all the different things that he was touching. Like he had the ability to bring people together and was really pivotal in in North Carolina scene and so well respected from all the other scenes that all the bands that came through North Carolina, and they still, like the Descendants went to see them, and I've seen them so many times. But when they came to Raleigh, this is, they had a Milo meets the COC skull T-shirt, which was mind blowing, like a tribute to Reed,
Mm.
because that's how important he was and how vital he was to the scene in general. Um, you should listen to what Dave Grohl has to say. Love or hate Dave Grohl. I think he's awesome. Um, reaching out and singing Reed's praises. And we did, I don't know if you're aware of the Teenage Time Killers thing that happened. And that was another thing in 2015. So right after that, that happened with the full support of Grohl and his crew and all the people around that studio, really amazing people, and that came together. And Reed said, it was kind of like another Probot experience, but
Yeah.
Mark II, and I was invited to be part of that, and the who's who of hardcore and punk and metal, and it was fucking great. And the album's really cool, Teenage Time Killers, um, and it could have been a lot more, but it just didn't work out. But we did one sold out show at the Fonda Theater in Hollywood, which was a hell of a night, and a lot of old friends showed up, and that was also 2015 was a cool year, man.
I
We were
was
hoping to, yeah.
I was in LA that week of that Fonda show and I missed it. As a matter of fact, that Teenage Time Killer album is in my best of the year on my website for that year.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that record.
It was just a cool moment, like of just, you know, hey man, here's a 2.5 minute song, do this or do that, so it was just very old school in that way and fun and brought a lot of people together across the board. It was great for me. I was out there and I had people coming up to me like, dude, like Randy Blythe came up to me and he was just like, man, I remember when you were in C.O.C, you played the Jetty with the Bad Brains in '89 and blah, blah, blah. And I was in the crowd. I was like, wow, holy shit, I'm blown away. And, like Corey from Slipknot, was like, dude, like, and then there was Lee Ving, it was amazing. And all these other people, the cat, all these different characters that played and or were on the album and it was fucking so cool. So it's a you know, milestone, you know. But yeah, so I wanted to keep that going, obviously the COC blind stuff, but there was, you know, COC is COC, man. It's his own thing, and I respect it. Um, at this, I support them. I've always been friendly with Mike Dean. I'm cool with them. Pepper Keenan and I haven't talked since 1993. Maybe someday we'll talk. Whatever. Doors open. Um, they're an institution, man, and they're doing their thing, and they keep on trucking, and that's awesome. You know, um, and it sucks that Reed's no longer around, but he had some personal demons and things going on with him and health issues, and you know, it's it is what it is, man, and we really miss him. So but Burn to the Moon, the Lie Heavy thing. I'm not just this. I don't want this to sound exploitative, but it just happened to be the title track. That was the song was written. I wrote that when Reed died. It was this song going on, and again, kind of like a buried moment where this reaction and this thing came to me, and that was basically a tribute to him, you
Mm.
know. So for
Well,
what that's worth, and I don't mean that like, hey, you know, but it sucked. It sucks that he's gone, and but he's not the only one. There's a lot of other people
yeah.
that should still be here, and they aren't. But that's life, man. You got to make the best of it, and I just feel really, really fortunate to still be here, and I'm blown away that people still give a shit, and um, things are good right now. Like I'm very fortunate that people um, have sought me out or asking me to do things, and it feels natural, and I'm blown away. I'm just fucking super stoked. I get to play music, and people still want to listen.
Well, you're doing a lot in the here and now, or certainly in recent times.
Yeah,
Got a lot of things you're involved in. One of which being because just a couple weeks ago I had my old friend Dan Lorenzo on the channel.
Dan goddamn Lorenzo, man.
Right, I've known that cat for a long time. We're old,
Yeah,
Jersey guys. Um, but he has his project, Patriarchs in Black, with Johnny from Type O, who's now in Quiet Riot, Johnny Kelly. And you're singing on that album, which is fantastic. I love that whole Patriarchs in Black, and your voice just fits that beautifully, man. Definitely one of the best recordings I've heard in a long time. So,
man. I'll just say right off the bat, Dan makes it really easy. And Johnny Kelly and Dave and who all the various bassists with Dave Niebuhr, Doggy Dog, and all it comes together around Dan's riffs. And he just, as you know, they just ooze out of his pores, all these riffs, and they make sense to me.
yeah.
And I was lucky enough to do 4 songs in the first album, include one of them being a really my first duet ever with John Costco. And then again on album 2, I got to do a song, and the third album I got to. So I'm just like, hell yeah, this is awesome. And I've already been sent the song for the 4th album,
Yeah.
which is fucking great. So my dream is that we would do like some kind of Teenage Time Killers festival thing where we get everybody to play. But I don't know if that'll ever happen. But in the back of my, I'm always like, damn, that'd be, how rad that would be. And he's like, yeah, no one will show up. I'm like, I think people would show up.
Oh yeah.
If we booked a
Oh,
show in Jersey, New York City, that area, um, you know, I'd want to be there. Yeah. So I think that'd be great. But that's just a thought. But it is, I'm not diminishing the fact that, the recordings. I think, hey man, if this can exist in that space, and we can bring people in to listen to, that's fucking rad, you know.
yeah, totally. And that the new one, that new Patriarchs in Black is getting some attention, man. I've been seeing some write-ups on it. I know Dan's doing
Yeah,
interviews with Johnny, and it's getting out there for sure.
yeah. None of us are going to get rich off of any of this, and I don't think we'd go in. If we'd all gone into any of this, we would have given up a long time ago. No, it's just we get to make our art, right? We get to uh, draw our pictures or take our, you know what I mean, like sing our songs, whatever the hell it is, write our poems, do our thing. It's all the same. Just be creative and have an audience, and that's mind blowing.
Yeah.
That's so great. People give a shit, and but I also got to reach out to like the heavy music community, whether it's punk rock or metal or whatever genres from that across the board. That audience, across the planet, is the best. Just incredible, devoted fan base. From every garage show to playing fucking grass pop and Hellfest, like I've done with Legions of Doom and the Skull and stuff. Like, it's like mind blowing. It's across the board. People care and they're into it, on all these different levels, and it's mind blowing. You know.
Mm. Well, let's get into the Skull and Legion of Doom. Because I know you've had some involvement, quite a bit of involvement with those projects, and Now the skull, that's the kind of offshoot of Trouble, right? Do I have that right?
Right, that you're correct. So the Skull came out of Ron Holzner, part of the company, the bassist. He was the Trouble bassist on several albums. Probably the most notable one being Trouble by Trouble, that was on American
Hmm.
and Manic Frustration, but that one album in particular. And he was on other albums too, but just for me, like was blew my mind when I was in COC and we were compatriots and friends and um I became instant brothers with like Ron was like my brother from another mother. Like we were just instant friends. And when we crossed paths when I was in COC and he was in Trouble, I mean, I just remember there's so many instances, but uh, I remember Trouble opening for Danzig. This is after I'd been on the Danzig tour, so I was friends with both of them, and Trouble playing the Rialto Theater in Raleigh, and Eric asking me up to sing Helter Skelter, with them. It was just like fuck yeah. And then we'd be on tour, they'd be on tour, we'd cross paths and hang out. We were opening up for Iron Maiden for 6 weeks and with Testament and Iron Maiden out playing these arenas. And we parked our tour bus in front of Ron and his brother Bob's mom's house on a couple of days off and just hung out with those guys and got fucked up and had a good time. And we were in the Trouble practice space doing like Thin Lizzy covers. Barry, rest in peace, Barry, man. Remember him being so wasted, he was like puking in a Halloween trick or treat bucket. Like weird, stupid memories like that. But no, it was so great. Like uh, these are just dumb stories, but we're just compatriots, good friends, mutual respect. They were influenced us. We love those guys. And then so fast forward years later, Ron reached out. It was like 2009, I think 2009, and wanted to do some stuff and flew out here and we jammed with Reed actually and covered a Deep Purple song and some Scott and TR at the time jumped in and played with Ron on bass and Reed Mullen on drums doing some stuff and we are thinking we were going to try to do something. Didn't work out. And then, but always stayed friends, with Ron. And then years later, my band Lie Heavy, which I'd like to talk about also.
Sure.
Um, our first show was going to be opening up for um, The Skull and the Obsessed in Raleigh. They were coming through, and I was like, I couldn't believe I was going to have like that was a way to launch my band, Lie Heavy. And that was the summer, the year of COVID, 2020, right?
Hmm.
The COVID year. And they came through and they were going to come through and the Skull didn't show up. And we are like, what's going on? They were stuck in Texas. We hear there's some issues with COVID. The Obsessed showed up. So it just became Lie Heavy opening up for the Obsessed. It was a killer show. But I ended up I've been double vaccinated, I believe. And I caught a really wicked breakthrough case of COVID, which I'm pretty sure I got from that show.
Hmm.
Um, but it was like a great show. People were blown away. Got super sick, ended up in quarantine like 11 days, just fucking hating life, really worried. Like it was very terrifying. People, I think, don't forget how it was fucked up, right? It was scary as shit. And it's still affecting people. I'm not making light of any of this. It's awful. And I got word then when I was in my bedroom with the door locked, shut, that Eric didn't make it and that he had ended up dying in Dallas. And I got word from the Skull Camp, and it was heartbreaking and incredibly sad. And that was pretty much going to be the end of the Skull because the heart and soul, the center of Eric Wagner is just a mighty force. Incredible vocalist, incredible lyricist, unique frontman, and he was gone. And about 9 months later, I got a text saying, "Hey, are you up for a call?" And it was Ron. He's like, "I'm I'm hanging out. Do you want to talk?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I wasn't sure if I was going to play again, and I don't know what I want to do, but I would very much like to do a tribute show to Eric, and memorialize him. I just don't want it to end like this." He said, "Would you like be willing to learn the skull stuff and come out to Chicago and play Reggie's in the South Side and do these songs?" And I was blown away. I still tear up thinking about it. I was like, "I'm not worthy. I'm not. These are canoe-sized giant boots that I'm not worthy of filling or standing in." I was like, "Okay." And I was shitting my pants a little bit, like I better not fuck this up and go out in front of this loyal fan base, uh, his ex-wife, his four children that were going to be there, his girlfriend, Eric's, family, and all these, dedicated fans. I said, "Oh my God, you're gonna get somebody to throw a beer bottle and hit you in the head." It couldn't have been further from the truth. I mean, it was daunting. There was a banner of Eric hanging over the stage, basically on the side there, and we went up and gave it my best, and it went really, really well. And people were excited about it, and it felt good. It felt right. And then I mean, not Eric, Ron said, "Hey, let's do this again. Let's do another local show." And there's more people in this area. Chicago's enormous, and there's people from the suburbs. The metalheads out in that part of the world that want this show too. And we did that. It went really, really well with a bunch of other friends coming together, other great bands. And I got the gig. And they said, "Hey, there's interest. Let's go do eight shows in Germany and one show in Austria." And you know, Hammer of Doom Festival, whatever, and or Hand of Doom Festival in Germany. We played right before Candlemas. That didn't suck. And those guys were blown away, and had Johan came up and sang, The Tempter with me, and Scott Riegers was there for that. And that kind of was the crossover thing that led to the Legions of Doom thing. So
Mm.
it's the Skull technically is Ron reserves the right to do Skull shows where it's just playing the older stuff, where it's me singing the Skull albums, and then Legions of Doom does Skull stuff, but it also does Saint Vitus stuff.
Mm.
So Riegers comes in, and then we also do Corrosion Blind stuff, and whatever else we feel like fucking doing. But we have actually representatives of the band, so we're not technically in cover bands. You have the actual singers, from
Right,
those
right.
bands doing that material, so it's legit. Because not everybody's around to do it, right? So um, it's cool. And we have obviously Henry Vasquez on drums, who's a badass, and is now the drummer of Pentagram. Also was out with fucking Lucifer. He's like the he's out with so many different bands, but I get to play with him in the Skull and Legions, which is great. And then obviously there's Lothar Keller, who's fucking incredible. That's Ron's he's Ron's right hand, and was part of everything the Skull is, and savant genius guitar player and vocalist, and just the most musical guy I know, like just incredible on so many levels. Um, and then there's a couple different guitar players, but now it's Scott Little came in the Skull and Legion of Doom, and Scott Little's played with me in C.O.C. Blind, King Hitter, and Leadfoot. So he's playing second guitar. So we're lucky. So we've been able to do dates and book shows.
That's excellent. And Trouble was another one of those bands that I'll throw into the mix. What I was talking about earlier with metal kind of going somewhere else. And that self-titled album, I think, didn't that Rick, yeah, you mentioned Rick Rubin put that out. Psychotic Reaction, classic metal song of the era.
I get to sing that actually now.
That
So
intro, I mean, it's just such a
no, it's
great,
fucking incredible, man. It's
yeah,
like some of the best shit out there ever, in
yes,
my opinion. But
absolutely.
you're right. That was a glorious time where, look, I'd go see shows, and you probably went to some of these. I remember going to see Faith No More, Voivod, and like, you know, uh, bands like that, like these mixed bills that were
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, Trouble Going Out with Danzig, that was awesome. Or us, like across the board, there was just all this swirl of things going on. I remember seeing Primus with Public Enemy that, like the same year, I think,
Yep.
it was just fucking kick ass. Like across the board, people were doing whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And I've always felt strongly that in the crossover kind of way is fuck the genre specific shit. I mean, it's ends up being really boring to go see the same band with a different name, right? Playing the same shit, like 10 bands in a row. Like, it's just like, okay, I get it. You guys play these riffs and it's this and it's endless and blah, blah, blah. That's great, but mix it up a little bit. I think people deserve better and they deserve more interesting. I'm all about the kind of festival vibe of just fuck it. Just who cares? Who gives a shit. If it's good, it's good. I don't give a fuck what it is. You know, those are my favorite shows, my favorite bookings. That can, there's all kinds of heavy out there. Who cares exactly what it is?
Well, speaking of heavy, let's talk about Lie Heavy, which is your sort of home base band at this point.
Mhm.
So how did that kind of come to be? And, what are some things you're involved in with that group currently?
So Lie Heavy was Graham reached out, and Graham Fry, who the former Confessor guitar player and the Leadfoot guitarist on the first two albums, and then we got together after that too, and have demoed and written a lot of stuff together. Um, I've been working with him on and off for literally 30 years. And he's a really brilliant guitar player and songwriter. And he just had reached out and said, "Hey, we got this, we do the Leadfoot thing, but I've got this kind of other thing, this other vibe going on. Let's explore that." And I was like, "Fuck yeah, let's do that." So we kind of did that with a different drummer, JD Dennis, and initially TR Gwynn, who was also the bassist in Leadfoot. So it was two of the Leadfoot guys initially. Uh, TR Gwynn from New Jersey, actually. I think he was in the same high school as Dan Lorenzo. Uh, but he's no longer in the band, but we're all good buddies. But so we just came together just to write and realized that we were kind of jamming on this more of a Sabbathy, Deep Purple-y, throwback vibe of heavy, a little bit across the board, and then just we're figuring things out, and that's how that came to be. We just put that together and have this songs. A couple brought up, did a couple Leadfoot songs that never saw the light of day. Nothing to Steal and Unbeliever were songs that had been written like way back, like literally 30 years ago, and just said, "Hey, let's do these tracks," and added all these other ones, and it was just really easy, really fun. Like a bunch of adults, nobody with any brutal addictive things going on or distractions, people that holding down jobs, you know, able to pay their share of the practice space, and you know what I mean. Like it's just a very easy, and local, and most of all, really, 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 really good players. Like just incredible players. So just very schooled people that were into a lot of the same stuff going back, way back, and nerding out on shit from the 50s and 60s and 70s, and you know just talking about you know production ideas, drum sounds, and the engineers and producers, and going for this and going for that, just nerding out on that and having fun. So that's what Lie Heavy is just a deep dive into that kind of musical thing. It's very free and easy, and also reserves the right to kind of play with a lot of different ideas across the board, whether it's more of a hardcore punk sounding thing like some of the stuff on the last album or the first album, or super blues rock, heavy rock, kind of thing, or it's just across the board. So yeah, it's just cool. It's easy.
Excellent. So,
Yes. So
You
yeah, we
have to
signed a
have,
deal with initially we put out the first album ourselves, and then my buddy Pellet,
yep.
who you know who that is, the
Sure.
man, the legend, the myth. Um, um, I connected with him through Henry Vasquez, and we had, also, like you and me, had a billion mutual friends and talked, and he was we were the Mutual Adoration Society. Anyways, he came through for me and said, hey, uh, said he could get us, we put out the album ourselves. And he said he reached out and got us the Heavy Psych Sounds deal, which is put us in a stable of some really great bands, a little stamp of legitimacy, if you will. So that was very cool, getting the album out to more people. So we re-released it with a new album cover, and got a little bit more attention.
That's
So
excellent.
yeah. So and right now we're writing the new album. Obviously, no title for that yet, but that's hopefully going to be out early next year, 2025. We have a lot of songs already down, about 15, but we're probably going to write another 5 to 10 more, and then kind of cull the herd and pick the best 12. You know, just because that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been cool kind of following you over the years because, obviously, like I mentioned, I really dug the King Hitter EP. I was following the whole Blind thing, the Leadfoot thing, and it's great to see you so active in the here and now after all this time,
I'm
Well,
I've mentioned earlier. I'm very fortunate that people care, and kind of, I guess, everything old is new again. And some people also like, you're still doing it, or I thought you were dead. That kind of thing. I'm like, I'm just kidding, but it's nice. Some people are just surprised. Oh shit, that guy's got something. And there's people that haven't realized that I've been active on whatever various levels. And I understand people have their own lives, and this is not top 40 kind of shit, or that doesn't even exist anymore, does it? I'm showing my age, but you know what I mean. It's not out there in a way where your average person is just going to walk into it. It's part of this whole heavy genre, subgenre kind of thing. And so I've been making noise quietly and louder at certain times for the last, post COC, and some people were aware and some people weren't, and some are aware of certain things and not others. But thanks to someone like you, I'm able to kind of talk about all the versions of it and my evolution and my trajectory. And I'm just lucky I can actually hit the notes still and sing. And I've had various periods where it was harder for me, and right now it feels like really easy. Um, as my voice goes up. No, I'm just able to kind of do my thing, and I'm fortunate. I think my mom gave me shit a couple of years back. I was like, Mom, I feel like it's really weird. I feel like I can kind of do this better than I've done in a long time. In fact, I might be doing better. She goes, well, you're kind of built like an opera singer now. Yeah. I was like, yeah, thanks, Mom. Thanks. It's like no filter. It's like, okay, I see where you're going with this. You know, 50 pounds ago, like, or whatever, yeah, 30, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm just joking, but you know what I mean? So we're all still out there doing it in our various capacities. And I'm just lucky that I get to do it with super amazing players, with no matter who it is. And I have a lot of other people reach out to me, and I'm always flattered and floored, and I'm open to other projects, but Patriarchs and Lie Heavy and the Legions and Skull thing is a lot, and it's cool. And I'm blown away that it's beyond just a recording, that I get to go play shows. So I got to do the mad plug, obviously, and maybe it's just leading up to this at some point, but Legions of Doom, it's today is August 16th in the year of our Lord 2024. So no, uh, in about a month, the Legions of Doom Skull 3, it's called, album is coming out on TP Records, and we're going to be doing some dates to support that are it's pretty cool. I'm flying to Texas, not this weekend, but next weekend to jam with the guys at Henry's place, and we're all coming together, and then we're going to be flying into New York City and playing the opening night, the opening party for Desert Fest, promoting the album Thursday the 9th, sorry, Thursday, September 12th. And then we go to Braintree, Mass, just outside of Boston, and play a show the next day. And then we fly back to Raleigh to my hometown area, and then play a show too. So it's like the album release weekend, and then a week later we do Ripple Fest on that following Friday, and then we also have Heavy Chicago booked in November, the first weekend in November.
Oh, great.
So that's awesome. You got your tickets?
I may not be able to do it
I'm just
this year.
kidding.
No,
But yeah,
but I'm a big Chicago guy. I've got music friends
dude,
out there, played in bands out there, love the city.
I do too, man. How great is that town? I've always coming through with all the various bands I've been in. This was like, I love this fucking town.
Oh yeah.
So the added bonus of being able to do this is fucking Chicago,
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for anybody who just doesn't get it, but Chicago just fucking rules, man.
It
And
does.
I just feel very comfortable there, and it's like I get Chicago gets me, I think, and that's going to be a great weekend where we get to play. We're doing a Skull show on Saturday, and then a Legions of Doom show, I think, Sunday. This is like
That's,
November 2nd, November 3rd, so double booked for that festival.
yeah, that's great, man. I know
Yeah,
you're gonna have a wonderful time out there.
yeah, you got to do it, man. You got to do it.
Got it.
So,
We were talking this whole time about how small the world is and mutual friends. I just did a video the other day with my buddy Sal. I played in a band with him called Electric Frankenstein a while
I
back.
know, of course, I know those guys.
Yeah, and Sal, because you mentioned TP Records. Well, Sal did that whole series back in the day, the Fistful of Rock and Roll series on TP. It was like a garage rock, like Super Suckers. I think they were even on it, you know. So it was bands like that, that like more rock
Yeah,
and roll punk stuff.
yeah,
And TP put that out. So the first ever like 12-inch I was ever on was a TP record. So
that's fucking
it's
awesome.
rad that, A, they're still around, and B, you've got a record coming out with them.
And
That's
TP is awesome. So I'm super excited that they're going to put out the record.
yeah, it's cool. And I'm excited as a fan of your work to know that there's so much happening now and moving forward.
Well,
Um,
yeah, that's going to be. I sing 4 tracks on that album, and then Scott Riegers, of Mighty Scott Riegers, St. Vitus,
mhm.
sings 4 tracks, and then there's also a track of an Eric Wagner song with Eric singing on there
Oh
as well.
wow.
So it's pretty haunting, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, I
But
gotta get
really,
my
really,
hands on it.
really, really cool, really cool.
Yeah.
And just so people know, it's sanctioned by the family. So I sing all of Eric's lyrics, and so does Scott, and we adapted them to work with the music. Like there was works in progress, some of it kind of there, and some of it just there. It was a sandbox, and we took those words and I applied it my way. Scott applied it his way, and that's what this is this kind of amazing tribute and transition for the band. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm a big Scott fan. As much as I love Wino, who doesn't love Wino, you
of
know.
course, wino's wino, but
But the Scott Vitus, I think that's the stuff I listen to more of the two.
well, you know, I just remember seeing Scott. I met him, it was like 1984, 85, no, 85 at the Ritz, the old original Ritz in New York City. And Vitus was opening up for Black Flag. And I just was able to kind of get in there and hang out. I had connections there and was hanging out, talking to them and talking to Kira when she was playing bass and Flag and Black Flag, and then hanging out, talking to the guys, and invite us a little bit. So I was like, Scott, I don't know if you remember this, but I met you almost 40 years ago, like when I ended up hooking up with him and doing shows and stuff. So it was cool. And Scott Riegers happens to be the nicest human being on earth.
Mm.
You know, like he is just beyond being a brilliant guy, and he's smart, empathetic. Just if there's some shitty stuff going on in the room and Scott Riggers walks in, everything's better.
Yeah.
Like he's just this calming force. It's just kind of weird, you know, like in a good way. He's got that aura, you know, like this kind of unspoken thing, you know. There was, you know, and it's just like, man, I don't know what's going on, but everything's kind of better now, you know. Riggers is in the room, you know.
That's cool,
I
man.
love,
That's
I love
cool.
that guy. He's awesome,
Yeah,
just
I'm
awesome.
so psyched to hear that record, man. I can't wait now.
Yeah, yeah, I can't wait, man. Super cool album cover. Um, you know, killer label, killer promo people. You know, Liz, um, Kenny's awesome. You know, it's a cool thing. I'm looking forward to, man, big time.
Excellent. Did we hit all the bands? Did we miss anybody?
Um, just no, I'm just kidding. No, no, we totally hit all the bands. You let me wax on and what go on and on about everything, and you know, no, nailed it, man. Thank you.
Cool, cool, man.
Well, hopefully you're not like worn out and bored to tears and like looking at your watch, you know. But
We can do another hour and a half, man, as far as I'm concerned. I love this.
well, you know, let me go light a bowl. We'll see what happens. You know, like,
Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, when the record comes out, man, I want to spend some time kind of living in it because I'm really
of
psyched to.
course, no, no,
But if you or any other guys want to come on, man, and talk about that when it's out, I'd love to have you.
no, that'd be great. And yeah, and I look forward also to when Lie Heavy happens down the road, you know, to reconnecting with you. And
Yeah.
if any kind of patriarchs thing you want to ever talk about, that's, you know, so anything. I'm just incredibly, I'm grateful and honored um, that you care and people care. I really am. I'm not trying to be phony about that. I'm just blown away. Blown away. You got anybody wants to listen to me ramble? You're like, hey, shut up, old guy. Go, you know, old guy at the bar.
No,
Like, yeah, yeah, that guy used to do stuff. You know, like, you know. So
no,
I'm
man.
so fucking stoked. This is the happiest place, man. I mean, think about what we have experienced and get to experience, and not everybody has this. It's so kick ass. It really is.
Yeah, man, definitely. And it's been an honor having you on the show. Really appreciate giving me so much time. And yeah,
Yeah.
please come back, man. When the record comes out, we'll do this again.
Thanks, man.